This is a Hague Corporate Affairs podcast in 2 parts. We are honored to be joined by the authors of the book Capitalism Reconnected, Towards a Sustainable, Inclusive and Innovative Market Economy.
In the times we are living, solid proposals for Capitalism Reconnected are most welcome.
Both authors, Professor Jan Peter Balkenende, former Prime Minister of the Netherlands and associate partner at Hague Corporate Affairs, and Professor Govert Buijs, join us in a conversation with Hague advisor Manon Dees and Hague Managing Director Sandra Maas to talk about their book.
Welcome, Govert and Jan Peter. It's really good to have you here. Manon and I are honored to interview you about your new book, Capitalism Reconnected. Welcome to the first part of 2 parts Hague Corporate Affairs podcast. First of all, congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's a real venture that you have behind you, so that is a great achievement. In short, for our listeners, the book provides insights and directions for mitigating the negative effects of prosperity and growth and creating a more just, equal, connected and sustainable form of capitalism, with Europe taking a leading role. And the main theme of the book is really reconnection, reconnecting generations, reconnecting groups within nations, nations within Europe, but also European nations with other regions of the world and the global south, and reconnecting with nature. And a great book for everybody, really, for scientists, economic thinkers and researchers, for those interested in geopolitics and Europe and the influence on business, for those interested in general European economic policies, past, present and hopefully future, and related very much to our work here at Hague, for business and business leaders who want to know more about operating within the context of responsible capitalism and who feel they really have a responsibility in that sense. So in short, a great book for everybody. And everybody who really feels that it's time for capitalism to, as you say, grow up. First of all, Jan Peter, what prompted you to write this book?
In any case, thanks for your beautiful introduction and your nice words. There was clearly a reason to write this book, because we are confronted with a lot of economic issues, uncertainties, difficulties. We are confronted with geopolitical tensions, geoeconomic fragmentation. And we talk about people. How do they feel about society and the economy, feelings of uncertainty? And we see that sometimes these different issues are discussed in separate ways. And it's better to have an integral view on it. That's one reason to write this book. The other one is there a kind of common agenda? Is that possible? And Govert and I, we both are really standing behind the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. We think it's a great set of goals and it's necessary. The basic idea behind these SDGs is leave no one behind. And I think we need this type of value to get a better society. We see a lot of difficulty, so it is important that you work on having a view on a future that can unite people. And that's the advantage of the SDGs, because SDGs unite people, businesses, universities, NGOs, so that helps. Besides that, it's essential at the moment to reflect on the future of Europe. So much is on the agenda. And sometimes you see critical remarks about Europe or anti-European sentiments. It's completely clear that our future is in Europe. That's one. But the second point is, what is the meaning of Europe worldwide? Because at this moment, we see tensions between the US and China. And the question is, what is the role of Europe in the longer run? So we try to combine a view on the economy, a view on capitalism, a view on geopolitical developments, a view on the role of people and how they feel about developments.
Yeah, and I'm very triggered about the role of Europe, because I think a lot has been written about profit and purpose, balancing profit and planet and people. Europe is a new dimension. But Govert, maybe you can elaborate on the fact how this book adds to other books that have been written on this topic, like The Donut Economy, Responsible Capitalism, Stakeholder Capitalism. What is the added value of what you both bring besides the focus on Europe?
Yeah, well, it is you have this whole avalanche on literature almost on the reset of capitalism, although that has become a kind of difficult term in itself. But the new directions that we have to look for, and but it is almost entirely separated from, say, geopolitical issues. And it becomes quite hard to say, well, who is really the preferred actor in today's world who can do this. And that's why we chose for Europe, because Europe, its own tradition is very important in terms of that it has already dealt in an earlier stage with mitigating capitalism. And we call that the Rhinelandic model, or all kind of social market economy, etc. And this tradition has a little bit been lost in recent decades, and I think that needs to be reinvigorated. And what will then be Europe's own agenda in the world? And we very much have a strong plea, say that you say in between United States, which still has this strong emphasis on stakeholder capitalism, China with state capitalism, the United States on shareholder capitalism, and we should really develop this a new phase of what you can call stakeholder capitalism, or what we call responsible capitalism. And Europe is really the actor that we have to look for that.
And what I think is interesting in that context is your plea for cooperation, and also what you call in the book the power of initiative and the multi-actor approach. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I think the power of initiative is there basically on all levels, you can say. Citizens have it. And it is always important, and that can be when you reflect about the future of the economy, that you become, you have the sense of powerlessness, of say, well, these issues are too big for me. And that may be the case on all different levels. And I think what we really have a strong plea for is, yes, you can always take an initiative, but then immediately start to look for partners. And that may be partners on a different level that you then need. So citizens, you may need to work together with, combine in civil society organizations, or to address local governments. And local governments need to address national governments, or as we saw today, that the Dutch provinces really say, well, the national government really, we are waiting for new initiatives. We cannot do it on our own in terms of the nitrogen crisis. So it is always important to look for coalitions. Take an initiative, look for coalitions, and then try to scale up. And that governments can do that too, actually. And so Europe itself is a kind of, quite a very interesting scene in which all kind of governments are cooperating. And you saw something like that happening in the recent COP28 conference. New coalitions, even on a global level, yes. And I think that is the way you have to look at it. That you should start, but you never keep on your own and only take it in your own private sphere or in your own sphere of activity. Just look for partnerships, which is one of the Sustainable Development Goals, is partnership for the goals. I think that is really what we intend to describe with this multi-actor approach. Yeah.
Usually you see this debate between its state or market. When I wrote my PhD thesis already in 1992, I was criticizing that model. It is not only or state or market. If you want to have a balanced society, you must have a balance between state, civil society, people, and a market. This is our ideal. And that's the reason why we say it's necessary to have a multi-actor approach, because if you want to reach common goals, you need each other. If you talk about SDGs, correctly what Govert is saying, you need number 17, goals, partnerships. If you talk about climate change, the circular economy, combating inequality, these are the main issues of today and tomorrow. And if you want to combat those issues, you need each other. And in the past we've seen that sometimes the government says, no, that's the role of the market. Or the market is saying, no, this is a matter for government regulation or taxation. You need, in fact, all those actors to reach those important goals. So it has to do with the question, what are the common goals you want to achieve? This is really key.
Yeah. And to me, this sounds really logical that in this day and age, you need to collaborate to achieve transformation and transitions. So that's not really new. What do you see that you could describe as a really, really good example that could inspire others to seek collaboration?
Now, for example, in the time as Prime Minister, I was sharing the innovation platform. And we said, if you want to innovate, you must have the willingness to work together. So government, businesses, universities, it's a triple helix construction. You need each other to realize progress. We've seen in the context of the Netherlands, we've had social agreements, pension agreements, climate agreements. It's in fact an expression of the fact that you need each other. And you're completely right. It is not entirely new. These ideas were there. But we have to think again what is necessary to do. Because we also can see in this time, there's many times it's a short-term focus. And we talk about long-term developments. So the question is, how can you lay a connection between long-term goals and what you have to do now? That's one. The second point is we need also a positive agenda. Sometimes people in business sector, they consider regulation around sustainability as a threat or as a hindrance. No, you also can consider this as an opportunity. So what we try to do in this book is talk in terms of hope for the future. But you must be honest. And that is the big difficulty of capitalism as we've seen during the last decades, an increasing tendency of Anglo-Saxon capitalism with a focus on interests of shareholders and short-term focus. Now, this cannot be the story for the future. We need something completely different. So therefore, we need a new narrative. And what we try to do in this book is to analyze in a sharp way what is happening, what have we seen, are there new views on the function of the economy, and lay a connection with the geopolitical context. And I think it's fascinating to think in these terms. So, but you can see in this book, it's a more a holistic approach. We try to unite.
I also think what's interesting is you're trying to redefine what success really is and how you measure it. And I know we've had a conversation on, I think it's what is described as mono-tyranny of measurements or...
We have to pronounce it correctly because it's quite a difficult word. It's mono-indicator tyranny. I've practiced it a lot. No, maybe it's a good idea to have, to zoom a little bit into that. Because, you mentioned this idea of this mono-indicator tyranny, which is basically a situation where success is defined on a very narrow basis, so based on just one indicator, which is very often financial results, if we talk about businesses, for example. While on the other hand, we also see a trend which is about ESG reporting, for example, so where businesses also report on environmental, social, governance aspects. So this trend is already happening. But maybe Jan Peter, where do you see this trend, or if we can call it a trend, but where can we see this movement going, and where would you like to see it eventually?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. If we talk about measurements, we can talk about the macro situation, then we talk about the national income, for example. And the other one has some of the meso, the micro level, more let's say the role of businesses. If you talk about the macro level and GDP, I still remember the meeting I had with Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize winner in 2010. And then he was already, with others, criticizing the definition of GDP. He said, we are measuring things not in the right way, because it's only about financial issues. We add all those different components, but in fact, there's not enough attention for issues around climate change, for example, or environmental issues. So he said we have to redefine the definition of GDP. That's one. Sometimes you see the developments in Bhutan, they talk about gross domestic happiness. Yeah. And also the OECD and others have other indicators. So you can see a change, but still the dominant trend is the GDP. In the business sector, and you're completely right, we've seen that people say if you are only talking about quarterly results and as shareholders, that's much too narrow. That cannot be the case. If you talk about sustainability, we must have other business models. And that's the reason why people talk about ESG criteria, environment, social, and governance. People say we need integrated reporting. Europe is making progress. We talk about the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. That helps. We have the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. So you can see changes, but if you see how the practice is, still it is about quarterly business results. It's usually about what are the profits, what is the turnover, what are the cost-saving measures. And I understand that, but that cannot be the future. So if we are honest about quality of life, if we want to leave no one behind, if we say we should have a sustainable perspective for societies, then you must be honest about measurements. We're making progress. There's also, we have discussed it many times, if you see what's happening in only a few years' time, that's a positive signal. So things are changing, but as I always say, it's a matter of changing the mindset, and that has to do with sustainability higher on the agenda. Taking into account the interests of next generations. What about our planet? That's a mindset. And the mainstream is it should be done by everyone. And we try to contribute with this book to changing the mindset and the mainstream. And therefore, your point of the measurement is really key.
And just to add on this, of course, one of the difficulties here is especially investors and the financial institutions who are still often have the mindset of a short-term profits. And there you see at the same time new developments there that you say, well, for example, climate change becomes a risk, a long-term risk as well. So that has to be part of the pricing, so to say, and part of the risk assessment. And so even there in the financial sector, you see changes, but I think it is still very important. Okay, quite recently I spoke with someone in the MKB, so the Dutch, you could say the SMEs. And he was trying to renew his whole fleet of cars. He was an installation company, and it was very hard. He wanted to have them all electrified, to get a loan for that, because it was not immediately adding to the financial profits. It was a kind of investment, and it would be at best neutral in terms of finances. But of course, the societal impact, the environmental impact would be huge. And then it became hard to get a loan for that. Well, these kind of things need to change, I think.
Maybe we can zoom a little bit in on the redefinition of values that you also mentioned in the book, right? So you advocate actually for, a kind of reinvention of Europe on the basis of basically the common denominator across European countries, which are its values. So you mentioned, for example, regenerativity, inclusion, human dignity, which are all, great values. I think nobody will disagree that those are important things. But one thing that came to my mind actually when reading about this is the famous quote from Henry Kissinger. I'm not sure if you know what I'm going to say, which is, if I want to call Europe, who do I call? And actually the question that came to my mind is, who do I call if I want to redefine European values? Who is going to take the lead there?
Yeah. In our book, you read many things about the multi-actor approach. And but unfortunately he died, Mr. Kissinger would phone again and he would say, I need one phone number, then is not aligned with this book.
No, that's actually true.
That's the point. Because if you take seriously the approach of multi-actor approach, then you will have to admit that you need several actors. You need European institutions. You need the business sector. You need knowledge centers. You need NGOs. And that's in fact also a matter of plurality in Europe. And I think it's also good that we have different actors. But if you have different actors, the key element, of course, is do you have a common agenda that unites those different actors? That's the point. And so there's a combination of, let's say, the SDGs or the Green Deal or whatever. You must have a common orientation. So, and I think this is much more important than just the question about with whom should I phone?
And Manon, you talked about values, and I would like to go back to the aspect of value creation. And value creation is more than the financials. It's also about how do we contribute to people, how do we contribute to society, how do we contribute to the wellness of our planet. And this is something we need to do together. But how would you respond as a summary to business leaders who might be listening to this podcast who say, yeah, that's easy for you to say, but we have the continuation of our business, and we have these sustainability goals we need to achieve. And that is, we're faced with a lot of dilemmas. And at the same time, we have shareholders who are looking for a return. What would be, to end off this podcast, the first part of this podcast, what would be your reaction to those business leaders?
I know Paul Polman very well, the former CEO of Unilever. And he had the courage to say they have to do things another way. He said we should stop with quarterly reporting, do it twice a year. And he won't have room for long-term value creation discussions. It was a good example. Vegas Siebesman, DSM, they said we must be honest about our achievements regarding sustainability. So they also have a paragraph, what went wrong? This is a matter of honesty. And I think these are examples of the fact that we are seeing a new tendency, and it is what you can call from value-based to values-based. And if you talk about long-term value creation, this is not only about financial value, this is about also human values, it's about social values, everything. So this is changing. And what we see now is that society expects something completely different. They want to have another orientation. Young people say you should change. We can see it in the media. We have legal cases. We have reporting directives. So you can see the whole world is changing. But the key element will be, are we able to stop with old-fashioned instruments, old-fashioned ways of thinking, old-fashioned strategies, and can we replace them by real sustainable views and insights? And we need frontrunners. Is it easy? No, probably not. But the direction is very clear, and I'm positive about that. So I think it is doable, but you must have the willingness.
And there's a role for Europe there to take leadership.
Yep.
I would like to end with that, with Europe taking leadership in this very turbulent time we're living in. The next podcast we will be broadcasting together is about Europe's role in the geopolitical context and the leadership you see there. So I hope we can take it to the next part. And thank you for being here.